Howdy, you two pards. Welcome back. Jack Spade here with High Noon Leatherworks. Back again for the next episode of making a knife sheath for the Uncle Henry Schrade fixed blade knife. So today we're going to get into a little hand carving and come on in, get a little closer, and I'll show you what we're going to do next. So our next step in making the knife sheath is we're going to take the top piece that goes on here, and we're going to do our image and do our carving. Off camera, between the last episode and this episode, I did do my beveling on the edges. I did do my burnishing on both pieces, and then I did mark around the outside for my piece that goes in, and I'll explain why I did that here in a little bit. So I also put in my grooved line for my stitching, and then I took my stitching tool and went through and made my marks for where the holes are going to go for the stitching. And I'm going to do something different this time, since I've got 3 thicknesses of leather to go through for stitching. Instead of taking my stitching tool and punching the holes with my mallet, I made those marks on there so that once I have all 3 pieces glued together, then I'll take my small drill press and I'll actually go through on each one of those marks, and I'll drill all the way through all 3 pieces. So that way I've got a nice clean hole for my needle to go through, and I don't have to work so hard at getting all those holes punched through 3 thicknesses of leather. So we need to take some tap water, and we're going to case the front of this leather. Remember, when we're casing, we don't want to soak it down. We don't want water standing on the leather, but we'll dampen it down. It'll change the color, it'll darken it up a little bit. I can kind of give you a visual of that, the difference. And then when this piece starts drying and coming back to this color, we'll go ahead and start transferring our image on there and doing our carving. And again, on my swivel knife that I'm going to use to do my carving, take a scrap piece of leather, some jeweler's rouge, and I'll put that on my leather, and then I'll strap my swivel knife. And remember, that swivel knife is beveled, it has a bevel on the blade, and I'll polish that on both sides. And what that does is, not only does it keep the blade sharp, but it also keeps it nice, polished, shiny, where it'll just glide right through that leather. You can see how shiny that tip is. and then you can see the bevel on it. So I'll keep that piece of leather out in case I need to strop it as I go through cutting this image into the leather. The image is I'm making this knife sheath for another YouTuber, and it's called The Bell Life, and it's some brothers and their family. They have a channel out of Covington, Kentucky, and I watch their videos all the time. They're pretty hilarious, so you might go check them out. It's called The Bell Life. So I'm making this for them. I'm going to send it to them, and I am going to send them the knife. They love knives, and there's 3 guys that are in most of the videos, 2 brothers and their nephew, and they'll probably fight over this. So that's who I'm making this one for. So what I'll do is I'll take my wax paper that I transferred the printed image, transferred it onto the wax paper. Then I put a piece of clear box tape over it so it'll extend the life of the wax paper. And what I'll do is I'll get me some blue painter's tape. And I'll put that wax paper, I'll get it centered on there. And I'll put that wax paper around the sheath. Because I don't want it moving on my leather as I'm doing the carving. So I'll cut off this excess, fold it back over on this side, keeping it pretty snug so it doesn't move. And then once I take this side, I do not want to put any tape on my leather, because when you remove that tape it leaves that sticky residue and you just can't get it off of the leather without doing some damage. So I'll fold this end over, fold this end over, put another piece of tape on there. What I'm trying to do is just sandwich this in as best I can so there's no way this image is going to move on that piece of leather while I'm trying to transfer that to the other side. So I've got that taped on there. You can see my image that I'm going to transfer through to the leather. I'll go ahead and transfer that with you can use a stylus. A lot of times I use a rounded head stylus like that, but because this is such small lettering and intricate, I'm going to use this finer point tip. Hopefully it's not too sharp, because it may want to just go right through, so I may have to keep it down at a little angle. I don't want it cutting through my wax paper and my clear tape. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll take that and I'll lightly follow that pattern and transfer that onto my leather. so far it seems like it's working fine. It's not cutting through the tape. I'm sure if I didn't have that clear tape on there and was just using the wax paper, it would have already punctured through the wax paper. And transferring an image into the leather like this is pretty much just like cutting leather. Just take your time, go nice and slow, because if you make a mistake, it's going to be there forever. It won't come out. You won't be able to get rid of it. Yeah, this fine point is making a huge difference compared to trying to use that rounded ball tool on that stylus. I can control this a lot better. So hopefully it'll make a sharper outline on this lettering. I have never done any hand carving on leather with letters. I have a set of leather, it's going to be hard to say, leather letter stamps that I've used to stamp lettering in leather before, but I've never actually done any lettering by hand with the swivel knife. So this will be interesting, and I'm sure it'll be one of those things I'll have to be super patient. I'll have to go really slow because the lettering's so small. So it will take quite a bit of time. To use my swivel knife. And you'll get a good look at it here in a minute when I take this pattern off. And the idea behind this is that I put a border around it. The reason I put a border around it is so that I can background it. So I'll take my backgrounding tool and actually flatten that border out so that the background around the letters is flat. That'll look like the image is lifted and the sheath is still lifted. And then one of my plan is, and this will be very intricate also, very delicate, is then I'll take that flattened background around the lettering and I'll hand paint it with a small tiny brush, an artist brush, with black dye. Then I'll go over the whole thing with some tan dye. So it should make it pop, really make it stick out. So it should turn out really nice. So there's what it looks like after I've traced it into the image into the leather. And it did turn out really good. And then I'll take my swivel knife, I'll strop it, polish it one more time before I get started. both sides. And I try to always do both sides the same amount of times. And remember, if you've seen prior videos of this swivel knife, you have a little saddle here that your finger sits in, and the knife does turn, so you can position the blade 360 degrees in your hand without taking your finger off of that little saddle. So I think what I'm going to do is bring you in a little closer and then try to get some of this on camera. Alright, let's see if we can go through this, see if I can get around all the lettering without messing this up. I'm going to do the background first, and remember, I'm going to keep my swivel knife at an angle because I only want the tip of the blade going through the leather. I don't want to try to keep it flat, so I'm only using the tip of the blade itself. And if your blade's good and sharp, it'll cut through that leather, and that bevel kind of lays that open on both sides. So that's another key of having a good sharp swivel knife. And good light too. You need to make sure you have really good light when you're doing this, so you can see what you're doing. You get in here with this hand holding the leather down, this hand on top of the leather with the swivel knife, and might make it kind of difficult to see. So good light's important. Shadows can really mess you up. So if you need to, don't hesitate to add more light to the situation. Again, it can be quite tedious. But there's the outside. There's the border that I put on there. You can see it really starts to give it depth. So I'll go ahead and just drop my knife again, because I want to keep that as sharp as possible. Then I'll start on the leather, or the lettering. And the lettering is going to be a little difficult because they're small letters, and some of them actually touch each other, and that's just the way their logo is. You can see some of the letters, like those L's and the on Bell and the large L on Life, they all touch. A lot of those letters touch each other, so that may be interesting on how to get around all that. And then the tight curves around the top of the H and the L's and the T. So go ahead and start, and I think what I'll try to do is turn that. Let's see how this first one works, and turn my piece of leather and then continue back up. And the whole point of that is I want to try to get around those round edges without tearing the leather up or going too far. If you go beyond the cut or beyond the pattern that's in there, that's going to make it really difficult. And obviously you can't fix it. I mean, you could try to hide it, but the chances of that are pretty slim. And again, I am going to background this. So that may help a little on being able to hide some tiny imperfections. And again, it's going to be one of those things where I'm going to have to go really slow. So I'm going to go ahead, cut this out, and then I'll be back with you. Alright, so I've got all the letters carved in there. Again, it's real tedious to get that little stuff in there like that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mallet, I'm going to take my backgrounding tool, which is this tool right here. And I'm going to go around and do from the inside of the border to each letter. So let me do a little bit here. give you an idea what it's going to look like. And this is the part that I'll actually use the paintbrush on, that little artist brush, and make it black. So you can see there on the background between the outside border and the letter T, it's starting to flatten that background out. So I'm going to go ahead, finish that, then I'll be back and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, I got that backgrounding tool done, and you can see that really makes that pop off of there like a 3D effect. Turn that at a little angle, let the light shine on it. But then when you put that black dye on that background and then dye tan over the top of it, it'll just really make it pop. So what I'll do is I see a spot that I missed right here on the border. Make sure, double check everything, didn't miss anything. And then the next step is I'll have to paint the background black before and let that dry overnight before I can do my tan. So the next step is going to be dyeing. So I'll probably go ahead, paint the black dye now, and then let that dry overnight. And then the next episode, we'll do the dyeing of the whole thing and go from there. So thanks a lot for coming, checking out this episode of hand carving a logo into a knife sheath. And I appreciate you watching. Come on back, check out the next episode when we go to do two-tone dyeing. And like I always say, please like, share, and subscribe.